Welcome to the Mind is Psychic, where we talk music, addiction, comedy, culture. If you like this content, please leave feedback and subscribe. Let's get into it. Today, I want to discuss why people don't want to go to the doctor. For many of us, we're scared, especially in behavioral health. So that's something I want to talk about today. Get in the nitty gritty of it. Let's go. Why is it difficult to ask for help in general? But more importantly, mental health help. Say those words quick, huh? But no. Is it because we're afraid? Past traumas? Is it taboo to ask for help? Like the whole thing about, back in the day, men not asking for directions type of deal. They're afraid of doctors. Really, I don't care. You can't afford the services because there's co-pays and deductibles and all of that stuff. And then, quite frankly, they're just not around in your geographic area. You know, that's all well and good. It doesn't help us. But I mean, I remember years ago, I've always been blessed to have insurance at most times of my life. But I remember the most crucial when I was probably around 24, 25, when I was going in to get evaluated and stuff like that. What made it so much more difficult was the fact that, hey, if you could get in to see the doctor, which wasn't as hard as people made it out to seem with the location that I was at, where I was. But the issue came when you got prescribed the meds and they sent it to the pharmacy. And if you don't have insurance or you have crappy insurance, at times you're paying for a 30-day supply of a particular med, you're paying 150, 50, 200, and that's for 1 month because you don't have insurance and they didn't have this good RX stuff like they did back then. Yeah, there were discounts, but it wasn't anything like absorbing it. Like no, like $5, $5 deal, basically. No $5, $10 copays. So a lot of the times I would get on a month's supply and that would be it. And honestly, at that point, I wasn't going to spend $200 on a medication because I didn't think I needed it in the first place. So that's where that leads that. But let's talk about past traumas with doctors and everything like that. Well, it's way easier said than done to actually say go to the doctor, but in reality, you're you're too afraid of what's going to happen because of your past. Maybe a doctor did you wrong in some way, because of a particular, maybe you understood it wrong when the doctor tried to explain. I mean, there could be many things, or the doctor was just plain just mean, which sometimes is the case. There are very just cut and dry doctors that don't have the bedside manner. And I think for most of us, especially when we're in mental health, when we need to go and talk to somebody and take that next step, we need that that buffer, somebody to understand what we're going through. Now, it's all well, it's all well and good, but what about in when you're in that mindset? First of all, you may not like doctors. Second of all, you're scared. And this is just, I'm going to use me as an example. Going into a doctor was frightening as hell for me because I was so paranoid, especially when I was a teenager. I was so paranoid of what are they going to find? Am I sick? Am I, just one of those things? So that just leads on from in early years to, my adulthood. And once I got older, I actually didn't mind going to doctors, but during that time frame, I was scared. And then when you're young and you're being told something, you don't understand it most likely. You're seeing it at face value and you have no idea what they're talking about. Okay, with that being said, let's move on to the taboo part. The whole deal with, back in the day, guys wanted to ask for, if they got lost, they wanted to ask for directions and stuff. Or it's just, let me use another, maybe that was the wrong analogy of taboo. Basically, a lot of people don't want that kind of information out there because they're either embarrassed or it's the way they grew up. It just wasn't help. It didn't help. They didn't talk about it. So talking about it or asking for that sort of help didn't it didn't go well. They never discussed it at the dinner table, which, some it's like I said, it's a taboo, so it doesn't happen. Well, if you can't get help and if you can't talk about it, it's only going to lead to more stress, more panic, yada, yada, yada. It's not going to make it easier. Now, having an understanding of where you need to be with the behavioral health aspect and asking for help. Nowadays, there's a lot of peer support. And I believe there probably was back then when I was going through it, but I never used them as a service because I didn't think I needed it. And I know there's like care coordinators now that assist with all those different services, especially if you're SMI and you have a severe mental illness, SMI. So bringing that into mind, that's a whole different animal that I'll get into later. But this basically, I want to continue on the fears and why people in general just don't want to talk about it. Because there's a lot of reasons, and I've mentioned some of them before earlier in this episode. This one is probably by far, I would say, along the lines with cost, on the lines of being scared, is they just don't give a shit, plain and simple. They don't, especially if you're co-occurring and you have an addiction and you're well into that addiction. And that's for that time is helping you cope with what you're going through. So the meds aren't even, they're not even in your purview. You don't care. But let's get back to just the mental health aspect of it. You're not, sometimes you just don't give a shit, or you're too, it's not that big on your priority list. It's not top 3, top 5 on your priority list. It's probably down there at 20 if you're even thinking about it at all. So that's the one thing. Or the other thing is, okay, you'll go that one time. Well, you have follow-ups, but you don't go to those follow-ups. You give, let's say, a 3-month supply. Let's say you even take those meds. Maybe you forget about them. Let's say maybe you go that first time. Okay, you're hunky-dory, whatever. You get the prescription. You can afford them, whatever. But you're so busy with your entire life, with your other things in life, that you forget to take them, or, any other thing that can happen. 3 months rolls around. You're no call, no show with the appointment. So they just, there's so many people doing getting services themselves, they don't have time to worry about where you are, especially if you're non-SMI. And it's not that they don't care, it's just there's so much going on that they don't, and it's your responsibility to take care of your health overall. Think about it as the same as going to get a physical, a wellness check every year. It's not always going to be fun and glorious, but you got to do it as an adult, or you don't. And that's where I'm getting into the you don't give a shit. That that could be a problem. That could be a big problem. But at the end of the day, you want to think about it as what can I do to prevent that moving forward? Like even just talking through it. Like let's say you have a bad week or two of depression and you're not getting out of bed. That could be a once in a lifetime thing, or that could have happened through your life. Therefore, in, you probably need to talk to someone more like a medical professional. Again, these are what my experiences have been. I'm not a doctor. Again, I'm not saying anything. I'm just giving you my opinion and what I've went through. But I remember going way when I was young, the whole wanting to get meds. I didn't want to get meds, but I was prescribed meds, but I couldn't get them because my insurance. At that time, my job didn't offer, I was part time, so they didn't offer benefits until after 3 years. And then the benefits were horrible at that. But this was prior to that. And sometimes the doctors would give you samples, but the samples were brand name, they weren't generic. So they worked. I remember this one med just, it worked so well. But I try to get it, since it was a brand name, it was like $600 a month. And with insurance, I believe it was like 125. It was a newer med that came out. It was like it had multiple meds in one. I don't know what you call that, but anyways, that's the deal. But I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, so I'm going to go back to the reason why people don't go and see doctors. And more importantly, if you have a mental psychotic break or you're depressed or any number of things, a lot of people don't even go to the doctor to see their, MD, their medical doctor for the physical part, let alone the going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist. It's very, and in my experience, it was very, just wasn't talked about a lot. At least that's what I remember. And in my situation, it was always, I always spoke with my mother about it. I just thought, this will go away. This would go away. And this was years on years and years. Later in life, I find out, my dad had schizophrenia. Um, really didn't get into much of my mom's. I know there was definitely depression. The thing about it, though, is getting back to me is, and why I believe so many people don't don't go. I think it's a disservice to themselves. I would say a lot of people, I'm not going to name percentages because I don't have anything in front of me and I haven't done really any research on that ratio of the percentages of people that go that get on medication. I think a lot of it does have to do with them when you go to the doctor, you're just expecting them just to hand you a pill and that's it. When in reality, maybe you just need to talk through some stuff. Maybe you need a group or something, or you, like I said, just need to talk and get stuff out. You've got stuff weighing on you. A lot of things, they want to throw pills at you. They want to throw medications at you. And then it's just not one, then it's two, then you're taking five of them. I know that the average person is on like 4 to 5 medications in the United States, which is nuts. I mean, I'm not one to talk, but as the people that do, we're so unhealthy as a country that we're on a ton of medications that 25, 30 years ago, it was weird, especially with antipsychotics and mental medications, behavioral medications. That was something, no, you did not talk about. That's the taboo thing was back then about medication and about seeking help. You just didn't. It was like back in like the 40s and 50s, you'd have the housewives that were on Valium or some high type of benzo because they had one outbreak with their husband because they were sick of them not doing anything, you know? And then the husband would go to the doctor and say she's nuts, and they'd put her on a med and she'd be comatose, basically. She'd be a zombie. So, I mean, it's different these days, but that goes back to the whole thing of years and years ago. And I always like to use this example of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Great movie with Jack Nicholson, with Danny DeVito, and I know there's a bunch of others, but those are the two main. So it always reminds you of a state. Mental health always reminded me of a a mental facility, a state hospital, something where you're going to get, you're going to have in a lobotomy, you're going to have something of that sort to that extreme. So I think culture also played a role of, oh, you don't want to talk about that. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that. It's all in your head. That's another thing. Another big challenge is, oh, you're just acting weird. It's no big deal. You're just having a bad day. You'll be better tomorrow. When in reality, that's not the case whatsoever. You're just dealing with it, or you try to hide it, which I can't do. I'm one of those people, when there's something wrong with me. My attitude changes. I become quiet. I, go through all of that. And I feel that it shouldn't be that way. And yes, over the years, it's gotten better about asking for help and all of the services, especially in like metropolitan areas. There's a lot more they offer, but it's not the same as like if you're in a rural area when there's one country doctor. I would say most of them just do like family practice. They don't do psychiatry, or they're not like NPs or anything like that. And they're not like psychiatric nurse practitioners. So they can't really provide you the assistance maybe that you might need. And I'm bringing this always back to the medication aspect, not saying that it's always needed. A lot of times doctors try to put that out there. And some of them try to egg you on into this is the only thing that's going to work. Again, this is my experience. I don't know what yours is, but these are mine. Those are just some of the things that I feel that make it so important to get help if you need it. There are people that are there to help. They may seem, and I'll be honest, they may seem at times just like they don't care. There are those type of people that just do it for the paycheck and they don't care. But in reality, there are I would say 8 out of 10 people, even though it should be 10 out of 10, 8 out of 10 people really care, and they want the best for you, especially your case managers if you have them. Your family, of course, they want you. They'd be sick if they didn't want you to do the best you can and live the best life you could possibly live. If they don't, they're pretty messed up. So just keep in mind that it's super important to fully trust in yourself first. And it's okay to be scared, especially about this situation, because it's a big thing. You're afraid of talking about it. You were raised in a time or a family setup that did not talk about things. Anything that was tough to talk about, they brushed under a rug. Just sometimes it happens. And you've got to come out of that. If that's an experience that you've had, you've got to come out of that, because at the end of the day, you're the one living with this. Somebody can talk to you until you're blue in your face. For me, for instance, you have to do it for yourself. And if you feel at a time that maybe it's not the right time, maybe it's not the right time. It goes the same thing with addiction. But I think having that push of people caring for you, having an understanding, um, feeling a certain way in a positive manner, like I can do this, I can get help. I think that would be very beneficial. But those are just some of my thoughts about why people don't like to go to the doctor. And having like I mentioned earlier, the one thing of not giving a shit, that's the worst excuse, but probably most prominent. And I want to say that the older you get, the more in tune you get with your body, with your mind, with all of that. You will at one point, or you won't, I'm hoping you will, find that doctors aren't necessarily bad. They're expensive in a lot of cases. So are the medications. If you get on medications, not saying you should, the cost is so hindering that that's a big preventative way to not go. That's a big thing of, okay, I'm not paying $300 for a medication for 30 pills for 1 month. That doesn't make any sense to me. Even with, let's say, even with insurance, it's still $50 a month. Now, a lot of these medications are, generic now because they've been so many years. So they're little bit lower. But, going back to the whole being afraid thing, or why you don't go to the doctor, there are many different reasons. And there could be more than one reason not to go. So, just think about it. Just have some fun with this, with listening to this. Try to think about it yourself. If you're one of those that don't go to the doctor, and this rings true for going to your regular doctor as well. Like, you don't have the time, your family, you need to worry about work, you have all this other stuff, you take yourself, you're like number 50 on the list of taking care, because there's so many other people and so many other things that you need to take care of in order to survive. Because I would say the majority of people are just trying to survive these days. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind and just feel good. Do the best you can. You can do this if you want. If it's that important to you, you can do it. I did it. I continue to do it. And trust me, there are times when I don't want to go to the doctor. And more than not, I reschedule them, which is the stupidest deal considering I need to take care of myself as I'm getting older and so forth. So on that note, guys, I want to thank you for listening about different ways, different why people don't go to the doctor. So I'm going to sign off here by saying recovery is not a race. That's right. Recovery is not a race. Take your time. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe and leave a comment. You can hear me on all major platforms and socials under the Mind of Psychic podcast. See you next time.